Welcome to the Abundant Vision Fundraising Podcast. Whether you're a seasoned professional or a first-time fundraiser, we have the advice you need to take your next step towards major gift mastery. I'm your host, Tom Dauber, president of Abundant Vision Philanthropic Consulting. So, if you follow me on LinkedIn, and I hope you do, you'll notice I recently posted that I was part of the 76% of fundraisers that have experienced sexual harassment. Now, given that 71% or so of all fundraisers are female, there is a common assumption that it's only the women who get this sort of treatment. Well, it's not. Men are also at risk here too. You see, fundraising, by its very nature, is fraught with power dynamics. It's the person in need who is approaching the person with money and power. With such dynamics at play, it's no surprise that unethical individuals attempt to take advantage of that situation. Now, I don't have answers for you. As long as there are selfish, manipulative people in this world, I believe there's going to be bad behavior, and that's not going away anytime soon. So, before I tell you my story, I do want to say this. My story is just my story. As a young fundraiser, it felt scary. But I understand well that many of my peers have experienced much worse, much more frequently. As a white male, I believe I am much less likely to be harassed in this way. And in no way do I want to lift up this one incident from my past in a way that diminishes the experiences of others. My hope, though, is that sharing my story will help others to better appreciate the widespread nature of the problem. That is, if someone like Tom's had this experience, how much more might others be dealing with this? The other thing I want to say, in 25 years of fundraising, I have only experienced sexual harassment a single time. That's one time out of more than 4,000 visits with donors. Most of the individuals I have met with have been good people, interested in supporting a cause that matters to them. I don't want to give the impression that the majority of the constituents out there behave in this way. There are lots of wealthy people that have good character and good morals and would never think of taking advantage of a fundraiser. But it does happen, and that's why we need to talk about it. Now, let me just give you some context as to what was going on in my life at the time. So I graduated from Bowling Green State University 1998 in December. And don't remember exactly which year this was. This could have been 99. This could have been 2000. But it was really early on in my career as a fundraiser. Now, at the time, I was working for Central Ohio Youth for Christ in a faith-based sort of context. And it's a different type of fundraising. In that particular type of world, you're raising money for your salary and other expenses that the ministry might have. So when you're going out and asking people to support you, you're literally asking for the money that's going to put food on your table. Not my favorite way of fundraising. It's, to me, the most psychologically difficult. I have no problem asking people to help this organization over here or help our leader over here accomplish their goals of the nonprofit or help a university or a hospital that's played an important role in their lives. But it does feel a little bit different when I'm asking you to pay my salary and help me to have food on my table. That's never been my favorite way of working. So that being said, I was still learning what I was doing. But at the time, I'd had a little bit of training in fundraising, but very little. It was more, go out and ask people for money, right? So part of my MO back in those days was I would speak at churches. There were probably, 12, 13 churches in the greater community that I was working in. And I would just go in on a Sunday morning at any number of them. I was in a church pretty much every Sunday morning And the pastor would give me 5, 10 minutes to update the congregation on the work that we were doing with youth in the area. In many cases, I was permitted to talk about the need for supporters, also volunteers. And I was at a particular church that was a supporter of my work, and a very well-dressed individual came up to me, a gentleman, I guess I use that term very loosely, um, came up to me and expressed an interest in meeting with me to talk about giving to the work that I was doing. This led to a meeting at his home. We were way out in the country. It was snowing, getting towards dinner time. And we talked. He told me his life story and how he had made his money and the professional things that he was doing, and asked me lots of questions about my life and personal interests. And one point, actually, what was really kind of creepy is he started trying to tell me about myself, things that he observed about me. And he was a pretty good read. Like, he was telling me things that was like, how do you know that about me? But apparently he was good at just reading people and drawing conclusions from things that he noticed about them. But it was really creepy. I really felt like a fly might feel when they're trapped in the spider's web. It was not a good feeling. He was very hospitable. He let me know that I could use his hot tub anytime I wanted to. It's one of those conversations, like, so much was said. We talked for a very long time, but there were just certain things that he said in the conversation that you're like, that's the thing you remember. But it's the only time I've ever had a prospective donor tell me, oh, stop by anytime and use my hot tub. Really kind of weird. As the topic turned to money, though, that's where things got really weird. The individual explained to me, and he understood that I was raising money to cover my salary and the needs of the ministry. He let me know that he could provide me with all the money that I could need if he can be an outlet for me. And I use that term outlet because that's exactly the term he used. He wanted to be an emotional, relational, and sexual outlet for me. I presume maybe he thought maybe that I was gay and might need a place to connect for those feelings. But, one thing that I've learned about myself since that time is that in a fight, flight, or freeze scenario, I freeze. My childhood experience was one where I didn't always feel that safe. And I learned to deal with that by ignoring scary and painful things and just go on like they didn't happen. As I think back on that experience with this individual, I wish I would have told him what I thought of him and stood up and left. Instead, I let the meeting continue on as if nothing had been said, like I didn't hear it. Kind of embarrassing, but that is what I did. I was 22 years, just out of college, and no one had ever thought to tell me that something like this could happen, especially in a faith-based fundraising environment. You just don't anticipate that people are going to try and, buy sex from you. I'm fortunate to have left that situation with only feelings of embarrassment. You think about Bill Cosby and things that he did to his victims, but I wasn't drugged or taken advantage of in any way. But I felt like that I should share it with all of you, just so you're aware that this sort of thing happens in our profession. I'm not going to pretend to have great expertise or knowledge on how to solve this problem. I don't believe that fundraisers will ever stop asking the powerful and wealthy for help. That's what we do. I do believe that being aware of this as a professional danger is very important. I think being prepared with a plan for what to do in an uncomfortable situation is a great first step. And I suspect that had I been prepared for such a situation, maybe I wouldn't have frozen up. Maybe I would have stood up for myself. Maybe I would have got up and left. So what was the aftermath? Well, I was weirded out. Like I mentioned before, it was snowing, and it was snowing pretty hard. But I pretty much decided that I would rather end up in a ditch somewhere on the countryside than spend any more time in that home. I sure as heck wasn't going to spend the night there. I was prepared to walk if I needed to. But I told my employer, I let my manager know, and she had me talk to our chief development officer about what had happened. I believe I gave them kind of a written report as to what had happened. And they made some note somewhere that we weren't to call on that individual again. I don't know if there's a filing cabinet at my old employer that has his name still somewhere. But I'll tell you, we lived in pretty much the same small town. And living there with that individual around, knowing the pastor of that church and other members of their church, I kept what happened to myself. I regret that. I wish I would have told the pastor what had happened. I'm not sure if I would have been believed, truthfully. I suspect that this individual was probably a good donor to the church. Who knows how that would have gone? Maybe I saved myself grief by not bringing it up. I was kind of embarrassed too. I mean, when you're 22 years old, you think you're invincible. And when you get embarrassed, you don't like to share that. And I did feel embarrassed about what had happened. Even though I understand in retrospect that there was nothing to be embarrassed about. He's the one that should have been embarrassed. I was simply doing my job. So I just tucked that experience away, and I tried not to think about it too much. I don't think I ever really thought of myself as a victim of sexual harassment until I filled out a survey from a researcher at Ohio State University. Taking the survey actually gave me some language and some context to think more clearly about what had happened. And I'm grateful for that. I'm pretty sure that the survey that I did was actually produced by the researcher that was referenced in the LinkedIn article that I responded to recently. But when I took the survey and realized what had happened, I decided to be more open about the experience. At the time, I was a manager of fundraisers, like I am now. And I made a point of sharing this story with my team to remind them that they could potentially run into this type of behavior with donors. And I made sure that they heard from me directly that they never have to meet with someone they aren't comfortable with. And that as their manager, should they run into such a situation where they are harassed or treated badly, that they will have my unconditional support. There is simply no place in fundraising to tolerate any kind of abuse or harassment from a constituent. I hate to say, I still drive by the house where this happened, and I'm reminded of that experience. I don't live far from my hometown. It still gives me the ick, as my kids would say. Well, I hope this was helpful. I hope that you come away from hearing the story with some sense of the need to be trained in these things. I'm not sure I'm the one to give the training. I don't know exactly how to handle myself in that situation. I don't have any special skill there. I only know what I went through. But my hope would be that being forewarned is being forearmed, and that perhaps one person may handle themselves in that situation better than I did. Well, if you enjoyed today's episode, I hope you'll subscribe and give the Abundant Vision Fundraising Podcast a 5-star rating on your podcast provider. Thanks for joining me, Tom Dauber, on the journey to major gift mastery on the Abundant Vision Fundraising Podcast.